Welcome back to the Trending Communicator. I'm your host, Dan Nestle. We've been talking a lot about the future of work and how the constant accelerating changes in the communications marketing professions have dramatic implications on how we manage our careers. But it's not just ourselves, right? The rapid decline of trust in our institutions, the advent of AI, and the deluge of content, good and bad, misinformation, disinformation, call it what you will, it all has a cumulative effect on the nature of work for all work functions and at all levels. In other words, the very nature of what it means to be an employee, manager, and a leader is changing. And I think any trending communicator needs to grasp this as they deal with employee stakeholder comms, executive positioning, crisis management, culture transformation, reputation, anything having to do with outward-facing messaging. All of this is why I've asked today's guest to come back to the show. Longtime friends of the pod will remember him as the quote-unquote rare find, the communicator who became a commercial leader, president of a major company, a multi-billion-dollar global company. But allow me to reintroduce him. A graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy and former naval officer, after a decade in the military, he embarked on a public relations and communications career that would ultimately lead to roles such as Chief Communications Officer at Axcelis and President of General Motors Defense. After launching his own consulting practice, as it were, he joined CRA as a managing director, where he continues his work advising and counseling Fortune 500 execs and organizations on communication strategy, leadership, change management, crisis management, and culture evolution. He's a public speaker, counselor, and coach to dozens of leaders and strategic advisor to major corporations. One of the leading voices in the field of strategic communications, has been for nearly 3 decades. It's my honor and pleasure to welcome back to the show, David Albritton. David, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. Thanks for having me back, man. I really enjoyed the first time and look forward to engaging with you today.
Or you're a glutton for punishment. I don't know the way it works now. I mean, last time...
I think working in communications, that's just the nature of the beast.
It is. And you know better than most. I mean, you've been in the beast in government and in public sector and in private sector. And, you've run the gamut. And now you work, as a coach and as a lead, as a counselor and an advisor. So you're really getting a lot of the inside scoop that most people really don't.
I also added another, responsibility. So I'm an independent board director on a company called Embecta.
Oh, right.
So Embecta is a $1.2 billion diabetes care business. It spun off from Becton Dickinson officially in April of 2022. So I've thoroughly enjoyed the last 2.5 years learning the new skill of being a board member. The big difference there as compared to being an operator inside a company is you got to operate, kind of nose in, fingers out. So I got to know enough to, ask smart questions to really understand the strategic nature of the company and where we're going. But, my responsibilities to the shareholder and not necessarily to the team inside first. And so it's a different, very unique perspective. And I've learned so much. My colleagues on the board are phenomenal. And it's been a great professional and personal learning experience.
So let's add that up into the whole rare find situation, because, it's interesting. And I know we have a lot to talk about with the future of work. And there's certain things that I certainly want to ask you about your thoughts as they've evolved over the last few years. And with the way that technology and the way that, everything is changing around us, there's so many pressures and implications on leadership and on management, especially within communications. But before we get there, this whole idea of becoming a board member or being on a board, I think it's a whole nother topic to cover. But I've recently separated from my previous employer, and I started my own company, Inquisitive Communications. That's not a commercial, but it could be, I suppose. But anyway, I started my own company. And one of the things that I've been looking into heavily is, at this stage of my career, I want to give back and I want to help others. And I've been looking into board positions. And it turns out that having a comms background and being in communications isn't necessarily what a lot of boards are looking for, right?
Traditionally, no.
Right. So, I mean, I was very fortunate and was recently appointed to a nonprofit board which is really, I think, an excellent. First of all, the cause is fantastic, called Conversations to Remember.
Okay.
And it is an organization that combats loneliness among the senior population, especially seniors who are really suffering, have nobody to talk to, nobody to speak to, many of them with neurological conditions. And,
wow.
We train student volunteers. They go through our process. There's a technology platform involved. And we set up very, directed and positive experiences for the seniors by, working or talking with these kids a couple times a week. And I think it's a tremendous cause. We all have aging and elderly parents at some point. So anyway, I mean, my point is, I didn't really mean to plug those organizations. I'm kind of glad I did, but my point is that getting on a board is another thing that. Communicators now, I think, with the way that everything is changing around the world, in the world around us, there are certainly challenges, but there's tremendous opportunity to round out our skill sets, to, venture into areas that have heretofore been either restricted or uncomfortable or, kind of not even in our wheelhouse, and put them in our wheelhouse. And, more comms people on boards I think it's a distinct possibility in the future because of all that.
It actually is happening a little more as people, who select executives for boards contemplate what the needs are in the changing marketplace. Okay.
Yeah.
But one of the critical factors for any communications professional to be considered for a board, they've got to be a great steward of the business. They've got to be a business partner. They've got to inherently understand how business operates, well beyond just the lens that we have as corporate communications professionals. I coach my clients in that way across the board. It's increasingly more important for communications professionals who aspire to even become a chief communications officer one day, or a senior leader inside of an agency or wherever we're serving as a senior comms practitioner. But for consideration on a board, it is, very critical to establish what your value proposition is in terms of how different that voice can be amongst others many who have board experience as you're joining new boards, et cetera, or being considered for those. Traditionally, a lot of certified financial experts serve on boards because, boards are trying to fill up their audit committees, et cetera, because it's so important. That's a critical function of a board because of the fiduciary responsibility that we have as board members. But companies are facing very unique situations as they go out to the marketplace, crisis types of situations, or a wide range of situations that traditionally, maybe 30 years ago, they didn't have to face. And so having a diverse set of skills on a board to kind of diversify the conversation, to allow, all board members to think about problems differently, to solve them differently, to make different suggestions, that's a valuable skill set to have on a board. And so, many are seeking additional types of voices. And so for those that aspire to do that, you're doing the right thing, Dan. And as I can, encourage other people to do, get your feet wet by serving on a nonprofit board. But when you serve on that board, volunteer for a leadership position on an audit committee, or some, you are the chair of some committee where you're increasingly more responsible for the strategic success of that organization, so that you're getting that experience, but also being able to articulate that to a public or private board, nomination and governance chair who's considering, adding another board member to the board that they're on.
Yeah, that might be the plan. It's funny. I never really even thought about it until I ventured into this whole world of being on my own, and that kind of dovetails really nicely into this whole idea of the changing nature of what communications professionals, even marketing professionals, do, and what we need to do, and how our careers are changing, and what does that even mean anymore. So we're going to get to all that. And, I won't drop that thread, I hope, but the idea is here that, you bring this kind of perspective of not only experience and wisdom and I suppose the different types of industries you've been in, but also as a communicator. And I'd like you to, if you can, just, I know you've been on the show before. You don't have to go through the whole, kind of background, but can you bring us up to speed, like over the last couple of years, just like what are the things that you're seeing in the, in the world, I suppose, that affect our kind of personal management of our careers and where we're going with comms? Like what should we know about leadership in the state of work right now? I think is kind of a good way to start.
COVID changed the world, right? In terms of what we accept, in terms of how we engage with people, right? So if you think about hybrid and remote work environments and how we engage, how often people are going into the office, you think about success in any environment, any corporation, any organization that you're in, it all really comes down to relationships. Who knows you? Who do you know? Do they trust you? Do they have confidence in your abilities? Those types of things. A lot of trust and confidence goes into just the personal relationship you have with individuals. Well, if you're 100% remote and you don't really get to engage with colleagues other than through this computer screen, using Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is, right? How authentic are the relationships that you're building if you don't intentionally do that? And if you don't have the opportunity to engage in person, it's a tougher challenge. And so when you've got people working across different locations, across time zones, you have to be intentional about how you engage and how you're connecting with other people on a regular basis. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, but you got to think about, okay, well, how am I communicating? Am I communicating clearly, concisely, in a cogent fashion? Am I leveraging the right tools to communicate on a regular basis? Right. So email, I mean, a lot of times, because we've got this fantastic tool called email and we have texting and all that, we send something and many times we feel like we've communicated.
Yeah.
Well, that's not always the case. And so for the particular message that you're trying to convey, are you using the right tool? Is the digital tool the right thing? Or do you need to actually have a mano-a-mano kind of conversation, either via phone or, a video teleconferencing call or something like that? But then, there's the informal connections that you have to build as well so that you're building team cohesion. And it's all critical to the success of a comms function and more broadly extended into how comms folds into the overall success of the organization. Because comms uniquely touches every aspect of every business or every organization that it does. Finance does it too in a much different way. But we sit in the unique, locus of, being able to affect culture, being able to affect, efficiency, effectiveness, and just the overall operation of a company.
Yeah.
And so that's a privilege. And so our ability to recognize that and operate accordingly is one of the gifts that we have as communicators.
Somebody said recently to me, like, the role there's a lot of discussions about the role of comms. How can we elevate comms, or how can comms be more strategic, whatever. And I heard yesterday a very good statement at a conference I was at. I think it was, I think Andy Farrow, who's the VP of, sustainability and communications at Mars, right? He said something to the effect of, and forgive me, Andy, if I'm butchering your quote, but he said something to the effect of the assumption is incorrect, or the kind of where the question is coming from is wrong. Comms shouldn't be looking to elevate its role, right? Comms needs to be doing its job to be that strategic advisor and build trust in the organization. It's not about elevating, comms is not there to build the brand of comms. Comms is there to build the reputation of the company. And we do that by being good at what we do. No question. There's no question in my mind that's true. I think, there still has to be within, especially if you're a new communicator, if you're working inside an organization, there's a degree, this relationship building, has to be real and authentic in order to get to that level of influence that communicators need to have. And maybe that would have been the better way for the questioner to kind of phrase that question is, how can communications achieve the proper level of influence within an organization? But where I was going with this is you're talking about this authenticity and informal connections. and communications kind of being in the mix. Somebody also said to me, and I keep saying somebody said because I forget who, and I don't want to take credit for things that aren't my words, but somebody said, like, comms, we know stuff. Like, that's what it's about. We know stuff. It's totally true. You're right. Finance touches all parts of the organization. Comms does too, but in a very different way. And sometimes, it's either a spy network or a incredibly useful and friendly information sharing network, or somewhere in between. And you definitely don't want to be the spy network. You don't want to have that reputation in a company. So we know stuff. And since we know stuff, we are committing malpractice, I think, if we don't use what we know to further to contribute to the company and to move up the value chain, create more value. And that is really the trick here, is creating more value for your team, for yourself, for your function, as an employee, as a manager, as a leader. How do we do this? Because I'm not asking you to answer the entire question. This whole concept of creating value now has become, I think, a major pressure point. Because because it's changing. No, because the whole idea called concept value is changing with everything changing in the world. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with that.
No, so great question, great context. I think I can answer it pretty simply because I coach my clients this way. If we only think about our value proposition and our offering to whatever organization we're in through the lens of communications, we are failing the organization, and we're truly failing ourselves and our professional growth opportunities. We've got to transition our thinking, our actions, our opportunities into first becoming a business partner and operating as a business partner who, by the way, does communications. And we know stuff, and we're looking at things through a different lens and all those things. But what the senior echelon of any organization needs are business partners, or people who understand inherently how this organization makes money. And I don't care if it's a for-profit, nonprofit, etc. All organizations exist to make money somehow coming into an organization, because that's how it pays salaries, that's how it keeps the lights on, pays for its real estate, does everything, provides services and products and all that stuff. Okay. How they do it, where they do it, doesn't matter. But the CEO and the C-suite of the organization, right, even though you have disparate functional responsibilities, when they're sitting around a leadership table, there's a trust and confidence amongst them as business professionals, men and women, to say, hey, look, I trust you. We're going to go into this war together, and we're going to come out on the other side successfully, because we concurrently are going to come up with the right decisions, with the based on the right strategic analyses that's going to provide the best outcome, for the organization. At some point, it has nothing to do with the functions. It has everything to do with being a trusted voice around that table. And the more that we as communicators can kind of shed that communications first title and better become business partners, then you get invited to the table to be part of that dialogue, right? So it has nothing to do with reporting structures. And I don't care if you report directly to the CEO as the chief communications officer, you might be 2 or 3 levels down, doesn't matter. Your individual ability to influence outcomes, influence individuals, influence the influencers, is what we uniquely can do if we are intentional about it. So learning the business, understanding the nuances of how and why, paying attention to the things that business people pay attention to, right? I ask communications folks that I work with, as a coach and mentor, how many times have you read the proxy, right? Do you read the 10K? Do you know what the 10K is? Do you know what our, investment thesis is for this organization? What are the analysts on Wall Street saying about this public company? What's our future look like? What's our strategy, right? You got to understand the basics of the business so that you can tie your functional skills, knowledge, expertise, ability, to how this organization makes money. And when you communicate that effectively with other people who don't, work in communications, then you can, slide into being that trusted voice around a table. So I found, and I'll say this jokingly, when I go back to when I was actively in communications, all the other functions know how to do our job very well, and we hear it all the time.
True.
right? They tell us how to write. They tell us what we should say, right? They've got opinions about it, but I can't tell you one time when I was a chief communications officer, I told the CFO how to do his job or told the
Never.
CHRO how to do her job, right? But we get inputs like that all the time. It's because we do sit at the locus of everything inside of an organization, a very unique, kind of ledge.
Yeah.
And so us being able to leverage that is the unique value prop that we bring. And so all corporate communications folks who aspire for greatness in their career, that should be one of the earliest understandings that they have and starting to build that skill set over time. They're not going to be able to do it in a vacuum, right? You've got to create mentors. You've got to have relationships with people inside comms, outside comms, so that you are absorbing everything that you need to know things, yes, beyond what you know in comms, but also to build trust and confidence so that when you're sitting in the room, you feel confident enough, even if you're in the cheap seats. Okay. There's the proverbial, boardroom and the CEO sitting at one side of the table and all the C-suite sitting around it. But even if you're in the cheap seats along the wall, okay, you got a smart question. You have a smart comment because it's based on research and understanding those types of things. What tends to happen, particularly as we're more junior, we become part of the furniture. We become part of the wallpaper and we don't share a voice. And so we're just in the room taking notes and we're happy to be there, but we aren't contributing anything. Well, you might as well be another chair in that room if that's all you're going to do. So if you aspire for greatness going forward, then how are you, sharing your voice in that room when you have the opportunity? That's a critical skill for communicators that we don't develop. And I've coached over the last 3.5 years since I, became a full-time coach, a lot of PR communications professionals. And this is one of my key messages for folks as they think about long-term growth in their career.
I keep thinking about everything. Well, everything you're saying is just, it's hitting hard. And I'll tell you why it's hitting hard. And, I've been in high level comms roles and certainly in public companies, never CCO. I report into CCO and I've been part of the leadership team, an executive, by name, by title, whatever. And I have been a chair on the wall. You know what I mean? Like I've been that person who, comes into the room and, is for one thing or another reluctant to offer an opinion or advice or knowledge because, well, they're talking about finance now and, I don't want to get over my skis. And I mean, fair enough. I need to do more work on understanding finance. Okay. I take that on. But, you start off and maybe you feel brave. And then after a little while, the dynamics of the room sort of get to you and, you're like comfortable or complacent, just waiting for your turn, which often doesn't come, and this comes and goes in phases, by the way. It wasn't like always like that, but I've been guilty of this, on occasion for sure. And I can't help but think about, all of the knowledge and information that's out there that you can grab and you should be, absorbing about your own company if you are seeking to be a true advisor, a true strategic advisor, and also, niche yourself in or be a naturally admitted part of the fabric of the executive and leadership team, part of the decision-making kind of fabric of the company. And I think, now with all the changes around us, with the way that, companies are evolving and for many, there's a lot of things, the need for speed, for example, there's so much happening in all industries where, companies are being asked to do things faster, deliver faster. Communicators have to write faster, create messaging faster. The need for speed, the need for relevance and resonance, right? I mean, just straight up on the marketing communication side, we're failing at resonating with our audiences. And there's 1,000 reasons for that. People are going to blame AI. AI has a big role to play here. But I think there's a dynamic among audiences where they're shifting so rapidly. It's just hard to keep up, and they're inundated with content. How are you going to get in front of them? How are you going to get to what they need? And, and then on top of that, learning to be a steward to the business, as you said, right? Learn it. Like, if all you can offer is, well, hey, I know how to put that into words and make a nice story out of it. Great. Maybe that's all the company needs at the moment, but that's not going to get you anywhere.
Well, that's great when you're, a specialist, a manager, senior manager.
Yeah.
If you aspire for executive level, roles, then you've got to learn a new trick.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing that I'll say, and this is kind of a secret sauce that as I reflect on my own career and as I coach and mentor folks, I kind of put it this way. Your job and what you do all day, every day as a communications professional, if you were looking at me, it's on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's why you get paid every 2 weeks. That's why you have a check. That's why you are gainfully employed and everything else. For me, there is no special reward for doing your job well. That's called keeping your job, right? They are paying you to do your job well. There is no special bonus and benefit of that. You keep doing your job well, you get your bonuses and all the other stuff. The whole other side of that on the right for me, all right, is all this other stuff you're talking about. And if you aspire for greatness in your career, you've got to spend equally as amount of time doing all the stuff on the right besides your core job and your responsibility to become proficient at learning the business in these things. You can't do that in a vacuum. You've got to build trusted relationships with people in other functions and learn as much as you can about how the operation is growing, is going,
Mm-hmm.
What the strategic relevance is, what are the international issues, are there regulatory issues, are there outside influences, are there competitive issues, whatever. You've got to be a good steward of all those things. I tell folks on comms teams, one of the best functions to develop a deep relationship with is investor relations. Because on a daily basis in a public company, investor relations is thinking about how to tell this story to Wall Street, all the shareholders, all the investors, all the analysts, because of how important this is for continued growth for the function of a public company, right? When you understand that, the function of a public company is to create, value for shareholders and everything else is secondary. That's a change in thinking and understanding. And it's great that you sell all these widgets and it's great that you provide these services. And okay, that's fantastic. But it comes down to the bottom line and how you are, creating, growth for your shareholders. So understanding through their lens what the story is, what's the narrative, what's the feedback, right, is a great place as a basis for basically understanding how and why we operate in this organization. To get there, you've got to be intentional about developing those relationships and understanding. One trick as you prepare, and this is something that we just don't spend enough time doing before, and we'll use your example of going into some of those meetings, Dan, and you were sitting in the cheap seats and you were part of the wallpaper. Because I would say many times you didn't pre-prepare before you got in there. And what I mean by that is, okay, now you've got these relationships. The agenda is promulgated a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And on Thursday next week, here's the agenda. And SVP Y is going to be speaking about topic X. Okay. Now, you may not have a relationship with SVP X. Okay. But you have a relationship with the vice president and the director and the senior manager on his or her team. And generally, the SVP didn't put the slides together or the presentation together. It's the folks below him or her that did. And so they know about the issue that they're going to be communicating about on the agenda very well. When you leverage your relationship with them, say, hey, you get an additional 15, 30 minutes to walk me through what Tom Jones is going to be talking about on Thursday in that meeting. Right. I want to understand the nuance of it. Oh, yeah. By the way, can I wink, wink, nod, nod? Can I get a copy of that so I can study? Right. So the preparation you put in before you get to the meeting is going to make all the difference in the world, because now you're educated. Now you're confident. Now you can raise your hand and ask a smart question so that you aren't just a part of the furniture in the room. Okay. So prior preparation is a key for that. And to your point, let's say it's a finance meeting and it's not an area of expertise for you. you talk to and learn about at least the basics of that for
Mm-hmm.
yourself to be confident and comfortable. I'll do a plug for two of my favorite people. I got out of the Navy to work for Ron Culp, as you learned on the last show.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Matt Ragus have now put out their fourth book as of a couple of weeks ago. It's just dealing with the issue of business acumen for strategic communicators. Probably the best series of books on the planet for folks that, in our profession that want to increase their acumen around, finance issues or business issues. And it's a great study guide. It's a great, tool to have on your desk to understand, just the basics, a balance sheet, income statement. And
what's the name of the book, David? I'm sorry. What's the name of the book again?
Shucks, because I'm 58, can't even remember what I had for lunch yesterday. Let me pull it up really quick. I got to look, but Ron Culp and Matt Ragus. Okay.
Ron Culp and Matt Ragus. Got it.
Matt Ragus. They're both professors at DePaul University, excellent, guys, for, in our profession. They teach and train, and, Ron is just a stalwart inside of and a legend inside, PR communications, and been one of my strongest mentors my entire career. So the first book is Business Essentials for Strategic Communicators.
Mm-hmm.
Second one is Business Acumen for Strategic Communications. The third is Mastering Business for Strategic Communicators. And the one that just came out is Business Acumen for Strategic Communicators, the workbook.
Oh.
I've yet to purchase that one since, it's like a week old since it formally came out, but I'm looking forward to getting my copy. But I can tell you, that first book, Business Essentials for Strategic Communicators, I've given out more than 100 of those. When I was, working in comms, people on my team got copies of it, but I've given away copies of that book to people who don't work in communications as well. It's that good. And so, as you think about growing your career opportunities, the more you know about business outside of just communications and how we interface across the business, the more success you're going to have in your career. It is essential for future career success just because of the changing nature and what they expect from us.
Yeah. So even though we have all this chaos around us, new technologies, changing audience behaviors, changing patterns, regulatory environments going nuts up. We have regulations, we don't have regulations. New areas of technology that are utterly unknown and with ethical dilemmas and legal frameworks coming out the wazoo. These are these things that comms is really central in dealing with. At the same time, understanding, keeping on top of your business. Now, David, you're talking a lot, the things that you are talking about are really enterprise level, public company kind of must do's. But even in smaller companies and even in smaller operations, the lesson should be the same. Know the business, right? And one thing that has come up a lot, certainly, as you know, is the role of artificial intelligence, generative AI specifically, in our jobs, right? And in our companies. But I want to add to that, or kind of keep enhancing this part of the conversation, which is the role of generative AI as a career enhancer and as a personal, in this case, personal career or personal knowledge enhancer. And let me tell you what I'm thinking here, because this is something that is not the straight up forward use case that people think of when they think of AI. They think of, okay, I'm going to use this to take care of a lot of the grunt work and, get to efficiency and productivity. That's your basic use case. It'll write things for me. It'll do my emails, whatever it is. Right. And, but I pose this with the advances that are there now. Everything that you're talking about, getting up to speed on your company, understanding the finance, right? While it would be better, I think, to be in an environment where you build a relationship with the finance people and you say, hey, I have a question. Can you explain this to me? That's best. right? If you can sit down with CFO or VP of comms or of finance and say, "Hey, look, Jennifer, I'm thinking about this, and I can't quite make sense of it. Can you just sort of work this out for me as a layman? What does this mean?" Best. But as you said earlier, we're in this kind of hybrid world, where things are moving so fast, hard to get on people's calendars. That's no longer an excuse not to get up to speed or learn things, right?
You're right.
Yeah. So now, though, with the tools, like, I wouldn't have said this 2 years ago, but now I could go to any of the tools I have available. Perplexity probably is where I would start. But, I would say to it, I need to prepare for a board meeting. And I would go into ChatGPT or something, and I'd upload the publicly available documents, say, look, here's last year's financial report. Here's this year's financial report. Here's the 10K. Here, the things that are available to the public, because I don't want to, breach any, security issues. And I would ask it to kind of walk me through it. Give me, talk to me like I'm an idiot. Tell me what I need to know. I would give it all kinds of context I would even tell them, here's who's on the board. And I might describe each person's persona on the board and ask it to say, hey, walk me through what possible questions I might get, and scenario and role play. Now, this takes time. It's not like, oh, I'm going to cheat instead of reading the book. Really what you're doing is you're creating an interactive experience that's going to educate you. Ideally you should still read the book, but now with this week, even, I don't know if you've been watching, but Google LM, the Google Notebook LM. I don't know if you've seen this yet, David. No. Where you upload incredible amounts of data and information into a Google LM instance. A Notebook LM instance. So you create a notebook, and then it uses the LLM to process all this stuff in ways that are kind of novel and interesting. One of the kind of immediate ways that's been used recently is people uploading, text like old articles or new articles or something. It creates your AI summaries like AI does, but then it does an audio file which changes the entire thing into a conversation between two voices, a male voice and a female voice. So it turns it into essentially a podcast. And you can listen to all the key takeaways of whatever you've uploaded as it's interpreted through the AI in the form of a very easy to absorb conversation.
That's amazing.
It's fantastic. And again, how can we use this? You've just pointed to one of the greatest and most important ways that this can be used to advance our careers. I, like many communications people, did not grow up with a financial education. I didn't go get an MBA, and, God bless the people who have. But, I've always felt on the back foot when it comes to finances. I know a thing or two, and I know enough to be dangerous. But, I'm not going to go out there and make pronouncements. But if I have all the IR materials and I upload this to something like Notebook LM, and I say, okay, talk me through this, it will literally talk me through it. Mm-hmm. And I will get better at my job. So, the point of all this is that changes the entire nature of our job and changes the nature of work. And it eliminates excuses, I think, for not knowing about your business. So don't you think that's going to it should help any professional really increase their ability to contribute to the organization. But it's going to open up, I think, new areas of expertise, or allow people to suddenly start connecting dots that they've never connected before, which is going to change what they can offer and how they process their job and how they break up their hours during the day. Fundamental changes to the way roles are created, to the way jobs are sort of done. There's a lot to connect there.
Yeah, a lot to connect there. And I agree 100%. So what I'm thinking is it's all true, 100%. But I'm going to put a huge asterisk on it.
All right, I was waiting for that.
What an AI tool can't do is give you nuance and human interpretation of the actual situation that's going on. Because regardless of how much knowledge you have, You're still dealing with human beings who have their own idiosyncrasies, who have their own views of the world, who have their own opinions and all these things. So you can come in armed, up to the teeth with all this great information that you just collected from all the, dissection of, all the documents and everything else, and come out with a clear narrative. Okay, this is great. But the interpretation of that other person to what you just communicated, or how it gets absorbed or understood, is going to be different. The physiology of any human being, and I'm guilty of this, right? David Albritton is different at 7 a.m. than he is at 10 a.m. than he is at 1 p.m. than he is at 7 p.m. Okay? Just because at that given time of the day, I've got different things going on in my world that my brain has to process. Okay, I got to get up, get dressed. I got to do this. I got to take the trash out. I got to get my son to school. All these things are happening while I'm trying to dissect something related to work. But that's different at 10 o'clock when I'm at work and I have all these deliverables and have this meeting coming up I'm worrying about and all that other stuff. So the human condition, is forcing you to deal with situations and knowledge and information differently and that's just your own physiology. Think about the people that you're engaging with too, who are going through that situation as well. And so their decision in terms of what you say to them at 10 a.m., in terms of how they react to it based on what's going on in their context, could be different than 2 p.m. based on their physiology and what their attention span is and all those types of things. Did they hear you clearly? Did what you say, was it clear? Was it concise? Was it cogent? Those types of things. So there's so much nuance to this that you have a ton of basic information, but when you add on the human condition to the top of it, that's the important piece of it. And then I'm going to add on another piece to the top of that as well. You can be the most knowledgeable person in the world. You have all this data, all this information, etc. But if you're doing it in a vacuum and nobody gets to hear it, then it doesn't count. There's another reason you develop these relationships outside is, another thing that's hugely important for career growth for communications professionals. Managing what people are saying about you when you're not in the room, period, all stop, right? When you go develop these relationships and you're asking smart questions and all that kind of thing, right? The fact that you're doing that and stepping outside your comfort zone, those types of things, becomes part of the narrative about you that Tom Jones tells to Sally Smith. Hey, Dan was here talking to me, he's a comms guy. Why is he here talking about, the upcoming earnings call? Wow, that's impressive, right? So now from a third party perspective, they've just shared intentionally or unintentionally something very positive about you, right? And so as you manage your narrative and manage how people are thinking about you when you're not around, your active involvement in that is critical. So it doesn't matter how much base knowledge you have. The tools are fantastic to help develop knowledge. Yeah. But you also have to exhibit that so that people who are the decision makers and the influencers know this as well. And so how you engage and what you do with who you do it with, it's got to be very strategic as well. So there's levels to this that are still going to be impactful on how successful you're going to be going forward.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, when I started that little diatribe, that, the best thing is to go straight up to Jennifer and say, hey, and I don't know why I've chose Jennifer as the name, but why not? I mean, there's a lot of that's probably because I'm Gen X and every woman I know is named Jennifer in some way. But regardless, you go to your VP of finance or your CFO and you say, hey, Jen, can you walk me through this? So this is that human part that, is and always will be, I think, just the critical and important and necessary for not only for your career but for your own sanity. Right. In this hybrid and virtual remote, all these situations that people are working in, that building those relationships becomes much bigger challenge due to the media and the mode of your interactions, but doesn't mean you can't interact with people. Correct. And I totally hear what you're saying. The last thing anybody wants, and what I've seen, people be accused of, and earlier in my career, I may have, full disclosure, been accused of something like this at some point, which is, damn it, that dude's just a know-it-all. What the hell? Like, that's a horrible thing to happen.
Absolutely.
You don't want to go in there like a no, that's terrible. So, respect others, and what you hear all the time is just chill out, listen first, understand the context, get those nuances, but have that information in your head, because then you'll process in the moment and at the time in the way that's appropriate. And you'll be able to back up any kind of ideas you have,
Well, it's two key words: add value, right?
Yeah.
So you can have all this information, but put it into the right context at the right time with the right people. That's adding value to the conversation. That's helping those individuals see it differently. Maybe you're connecting dots in a way that they hadn't seen it. Maybe you're augmenting the approach or the thought process or something like that.
Yeah.
But you're adding to something versus just spitting, out all this, information that A, they already know, B, okay, they thought about that last week. And to your point, you're coming off as, this obsequious know-it-all, and that's just not helpful for anybody.
Yeah. Pain like that changes you. And certainly, I mean, if you're aware enough and you're self-aware enough and you're like, shit, I shouldn't have said those things. And you go back and you reflect and you work with a good coach like David Albritton, and maybe you could knock that kind of know-it-allness out of your system, and learn to listen. What I was thinking about though, as we're talking is, so, okay, now we have the capability to really dig into our businesses and to understand more than ever as a communicator. Not only do we have the capability, we kind of have the requirement, right? We have to, or else you're just an individual contributor and you have to be kind of satisfied with that. And, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But with all this information at our fingertips and with all the ways in which we can manipulate it and absorb it in ways that are more amenable to our own learning style and our own understanding style, right? How does this change the nature of comms itself? How does this change the expectations of what comms people should be doing for companies? And I'm asking because there's this constant thread that's been happening, or that I've been talking about, which is that, I believe that corporate structure itself is obsolete and doesn't know it yet. Maybe not structure necessarily, because different companies are going to need different structures, but more like the whole fundamental concept of, here's the job description, here's the job. You do this, you get this done, you then succeed and move up to the next level where your job description adds these 3 bullets, takes these 3 away, and so on, until you finally get to wherever it is in your hierarchy, where it's a completely different set of bullet points, but it's a job description, and that's what people do. I don't think that's going to count anymore, because you could have a so-called entry-level person, and we're seeing this more and more, especially in like tech companies and things like this, who are, or smaller companies, people who are 24, 25 years old, who are geniuses or just have great common sense. They build their own ecosystems out of the tools available to them, and, have figured out some of the secret sauce, which is, hey, I have this job, but you know what? That doesn't define me. I want to do what's great for the company. So what if I have my own tool that helps me schedule things, and I have my own tool that helps me understand finance, and I have this whole other thing that, okay, I can't do. I'm not really good with Excel, but you know what? I have this other thing that's going to help me through that, and make me able to produce and generate charts and reports that are, et cetera, et cetera. You create your own kind of little workforce of one. And none of that is in a job description that I know of, right?
Correct.
So, as that goes up into senior leadership, obviously, the changes or the variability also gets broader and broader. I mean, what you can do and what you should be doing. So, how is this going to change? Or do you think it's going to really change the fundamental nature of what the role is of the CCO, what the role is of the CMO? And will there be a role, or will it be like, a kind of cloudy, amorphous remit? I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
No, it's great perspective. Great question. I think, yes, it's going to change. It already has changed dramatically with the advent of new companies, with new cultures, the traditional people, working 30 years, 40 years at a company inside a big manufacturing, retail, type. with these tech companies. To your point, they got a 24-year-old genius who is a vice president because of how good he or she, does whatever they do, in the area that they work in and those types of things. And then you've got just the changes of structures, right? You've got more flat organizations now. But then, you've got organizations who are more in tune with cultural and societal types of issues in terms of their policies and those types of things. So you've got emerging issues that are happening. We've got, political unrest that, companies are deciding to take a stance on or not. And so there's so many things inside these organizations that also have direct implication on outside and external stakeholders and how they look in and engage and all of that. So the role of, strategic communications is ever more important because of, I'll use that word, I love this word, nuance, because the nuance of how we're going to have to absorb all these things and help, our leaders, our organizations, our cultures, and how we're going to anticipate emerging trends, right? And issues that are happening, how we're going to help our organizations kind of navigate, if you will, through, some contentious issues, right? Very complex issues sometimes. And then, with just kind of the addition now of the things that we in Corp Comms are responsible for, right? That we weren't necessarily 10, 15, 5, 10 years, 20 years ago. Sustainability, CSR, DEI, social justice, right? All these things, right? That are just part and parcel to the responsibility today. And so people in our profession are going to have to become very adept at understanding these nuances and then factoring into how we make recommendations on, what's happening inside, outside the organization, right? So that we've got a steady flow of clear, concise communications, using the right channels to the right stakeholders at the right time, right? Being able to create and foster two-way communications because your employee's voice is equally as important these days.
For sure.
If you want to keep them, engaged inside the organization and not voting with their feet to leave your organization, right? We're going to have to deal with ambiguity. There's a lot of times we're not going to know. And as leaders, we have to be comfortable with saying, hey, I don't know right now, right? Based on the information that's in front of us right now, I don't know. I will get back to you. And you authentically have to be able to get back and, help people understand and come along on the journey with you. And so it's different. It's a new world that's, we're going to have to be very agile. We're going to have to adapt, right? If you go back to Heartbreak Ridge, Clint Eastwood, right? Adapt, overcome, improvise, right? That's just the world that we're going to have to be comfortable living in. There's not one static answer, yes, no, maybe sometimes a maybe. But no, there's a whole lot that goes beyond that we're going to have to be, comfortable with in the environment we're going to operate in.
I mean, would you say, and I'm starting to get conscious of time here to start wrap it up here, David, but would you say what you're talking about there seems to be a kind of a mix of the qualities of leaders, the qualities of leadership within comms and even external, even across the organization? There are certain things that are solid, like, adaptability, agility. Was it adapt, overcome, and I missed, what was the Heartbreak Ridge one? Adapt, because it's great.
Adapt, overcome, improvise.
Adapt, overcome, improvise, right? Still, I mean, I don't think that's changing at all. That's ever more important. But is what people expect from leaders changing? Like,
no.
Is the qualities are the qualities of a leader different in your experience so far, or do you think they're going to get different? I don't know. It's an open question because I certainly don't have an answer. And, again, this is an area where like AI is going to touch every part of our lives, but, AI is not going to, at least not yet, it's not going to be a leader, so.
Right.
Yeah, no. Is it changing? Is there going to be change? What do you think?
I would say for the most part, no. People still need leaders to show up. Leadership is what you do. Right. People say, got this notion that leaders are born and people, are just born into becoming good leaders. Yeah, to a point. All right. If you were 7 years old and you put a group of 7-year-olds together and one person stands up and creates the game and then drives all the other kids to play, that's just a person who's comfortable leaning into it. Doesn't necessarily make them a good leader when they're 35.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's a nice core skill to have when they're 7. But leaders deal with issues in common areas such as how do you deliver and receive feedback. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What's your decision making capacity and capability? How do you motivate and inspire people to do what they're supposed to do? How much accountability? How do you take on accountability? How do you hold people accountable, and how are you accountable? Um, what's your relationship capacity? How are you fostering great relationships? And then how change management, right? Change is
Mm-hmm.
forever around us. How do we deal with change? How do we make recommendations on how employees can deal with change and all these things? The core essence of a leader helps people get better, right? Leadership is about helping people and situations get better. Okay. And that's the fundamental, aspect of how we coach CRA Admire Leadership, just for a quick plug. It's all about that. So, it doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter how senior you are. The core essence of leadership can be very consistent. And there are leadership behaviors that are associated with those most admired leaders, right? The best leaders in the world have exhibited a lot of these traits over time. And, as you think about that in terms of me growing up in my career, how can I continue to be a better leader by just changing my behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of times in traditional coaching, we use psychometric analyses, right? We take, I'm certified to give the Hogan assessment. Okay. And under, the auspices of the Hogan, personality inventory, let's say interpersonal, sensitivity, somebody scores low on
Mm-hmm.
that, which means they're kind of caustic. They, don't get along with others well. They have a strong opinion about things. And what that does for some leaders is become a crutch in terms of, this is who I am. I know a lot
Mm-hmm.
about myself through the psychoanalysis, right? And so everybody's just got to deal with me because they know I'm this way. Well, that's a crutch. That is not going to make you a better leader. A better leader will say, okay, I know this about myself, but leadership is what I do and how I engage. And so I've got to be observant of how I'm engaging with people using leadership behaviors that are going to make them better. Leadership is not about necessarily making me better. I got to make those people believe in me and have trust and confidence in what I'm sharing with them, how I'm making them better, how I'm providing opportunities. So the essence of all of that remains the same, regardless of the industry, regardless of title, of seniority, of age, of all these external factors. Core solid leadership is really for us, for me, how I'm thinking about it these days is really based on your behaviors.
Yeah. And I would think it's certainly a prerequisite to have solid leaders, good leaders. And, different organizations will require indexing in different directions as a leader, right? Some will need to be a certain type of person. Some will need to be a different type, but they all have to share those kinds of qualities that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And timing plays an issue too. The organization in a growth period versus an organization in decline that needs to turn it around. Good leadership is still good leadership, but the way that the levers you pull and the buttons you push are different, right?
Absolutely.
That seems to be a solid area that is not going to change, like, I think, at all. And it seems to be a prerequisite for creating an innovative organization.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. When you have trust in your leaders, and leaders have trust in you, and you have a solid relationship, and those nuances you're speaking about are understood, then it's a much better precondition, I think, for allowing your employees and people who work with you and for you to run.
Exactly.
To run an experiment within whatever limits you need to set.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to be more and more important as we go. Last thing, I think, David, as we kind of come up on it, the last thing I wanted to ask you, so I agree with you that leadership is not going to change for sure. Relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So you started this off by talking about relationships. I think relationships, that's one of the big R's that, again, AI will not help you with. I mean, obliquely, AI can give you some hints and pointers, and, you can set up tools that are going to, help you coach through things or whatever, but it's not replacing the actual relationship you build with the person.
Mm-hmm.
I know you guys are working on something, an AI-driven sort of leadership and coaching tool, which is not a replacement for a person. It's an augment or a resource. And I'll ask you to kind of talk about that in the closing sort of remarks you're going to make here. But the building of relationships is so important. Through these screens from thousands of miles away, it's challenging. Any final kind of, thoughts or advice about getting through that? And is there value in just saying, you know what, screw it, I need to go to an office all the time? I mean, how are we going to keep these relationships up amidst all this crazy chaos around us? And then how's your AI tool help?
Yeah, no, great. Relationships are essential because at the core of any company, I don't care what widgets we're selling, what services we're providing, it's an organization, even nonprofits, educational associations, whatever it is. It's made up of human beings, and relationships are key and core to success. And so your ability to interface, to be a good leader, and leadership, people think about it as a hierarchy. You got this title and you got these people work for you, and so therefore you're a leader. Well, leadership is 360 degrees of influence. You can lead your boss. You can lead your peers. I can lead, I'm leading my parents into older age. I'm leading my kids through college and now onto their, lives after college, those types of things. So leadership is nuanced again, and it's about authenticity, and it's about being able to just, create a core understanding of what value I bring and what value you bring too. Because many times our relationships are very transactional. Right. We know I've worked with this person and I know them well. We've had beers and had lunch and all these types of things. And think about those companies that you left. How many people do you still stay in touch with on a regular basis as they grow and go in their career and those types of things? And now it's 5, 6, 10 years ago, right? That's the last time you engaged with them. And now they're the vice president of communications at company X, and your company just got acquired and you got laid off. And now you're reaching out to this person. Hey, George, it's great. Hey, we worked together 10 years ago and it was great, right? I'm looking for a job. Is it George's job to find you a job if you truly have not invested in that relationship in 10 years, right? And so then we're surprised when things don't happen because we have these transactional relationships, right? So, an authentic relationship is one built on trust. It's built on, both investing in it, helping each other in ways that doesn't necessarily have to do anything with the job. And so think about that in terms of the relationships you have. As it relates to Alex is a tool that is a virtual AI coach created by Sierra Admired Leadership. It's a proprietary tool, and it's built on Claude, right? As
Nice.
One of the more popular AI tools. But the differentiator as this coaching tool has is that it's based on admired leadership content. So admired leadership is the context of admired leadership. It is based on the study of more than 15,000 admired leaders over almost the last 40 years. And when you study a leader, it's not just the person. It's the person they work for, the person they work with, the person, their families, their speeches, emails they've sent, anything related to their leadership style in terms of how they influence individuals and situations and make people in situations better.
Mm-hmm.
Out of that, we've cultivated about 100 behaviors that an admired leader exhibits across areas like feedback and relationships and decision making and accountability, motivating, inspiring people, and those types of things. And so then when you use this behavioral approach, it's something that a leader can use on Monday morning to go be a better leader. Right? So how many of us have taken the Myers-Briggs or the Hogan or the DISC survey and all of that?
Yeah.
And we do it at the offsite. And then all the, we've taken Myers-Briggs and all the NFJs go off into the corner and they're slapping 5. Hey, I'm an NFJ. I know a lot about you now. And that's great. But think about what we just did. We've got these corners of people who all are alike. But did you bring the full team together and build camaraderie? What you got is a whole lot of like people in these small bastions of groups, right? Who know a lot about each other, but what can they take out of that experience to use on Monday morning to go be a better leader? Our approach is behavioral based, and we give examples of how we can actually use these behaviors to go be a better leader. Okay. And so Alex is a tool that's based on all of that content. So all the 108 behaviors now are involved, as a baseline of Alex. But we also, our founder and CEO, Dr. Randall Stutman, who's coached more than 500 CEOs, coached more than 5,000 people in his career. He writes a daily admired leadership field note, which is a short, be read in 1 to 3 minutes on all kinds of leadership topics. Okay. And there's more than 1,100 of those. So all of those are in all the white papers that CRA has come up with, all the book summaries of, major leadership books, all that content is in Alex. And Alex is not designed to be used like a search engine, right? Yeah. It's designed for you to put in the very specifics of the situation you're in. Hey, I am a senior manager at company X. I've been here this many years, and I'm working with this person who got here, who is a manager, but I'm having some challenges because his engagement style is very caustic. I mean, you go into very significant detail with Alex, and then Alex becomes conversational, and it's not going to give you the answer right away, but it's really going to engage in a dialogue with you to dive deeper. And one of the new features we just added to Alex is you can put your own personality, your own persona in Alex. So you can drive how Alex is going to give you feedback based on your preferences and those types of things. So we're constantly improving the tool. And so far, people have just marveled over the exquisite nature of the responses they get out of Alex. I use it a lot to just validate some of my coaching approaches. And it's a fantastic tool.
Is it available like only to your clients and customers, or
no? So you can go to leadwithalex.com. And you can sign up for a 3-day trial run for Alex as well, and dig in and get under the covers and figure it out. It's a subscription-based service. It's $400 a year, so it's not overly expensive, but you get access to a lot of content and a lot of of access to information that, let's say, some of the things we were talking about before, you're getting prepared to go to this staff meeting and the topics are this. What are some things I should be thinking about, right? Alex will come back with some ideas related to that based on the best leadership behaviors that, admired leaders have exhibited. So that's the best way to use the tool like that. It's different from ChatGPT and Bard, Google, and, the other ones that are on, the market, the co-pilots of the world. But this leadership behavioral approach is a differentiated one. And so far, since we've launched it, we've been getting tremendous feedback.
Well, I'd love to check it out. And I'll tell you, and I know hopefully our listeners here will go to leadwithalex.com. We have a lot of people in the comms world really who just, this is an underserved part, I think, of our profession. And to be a trending communicator, as we said in the beginning, you have to have a grasp on the evolution of leadership and the evolution of work as in our field, especially as all these changes come. And if what you're saying is true, and I believe it is, I agree with you that the fundamentals of leadership are going to be one of those things that's not going to change, no matter what's around us, no matter all the chaos and uncertainty and the VUCA stuff. It's helpful to develop, and you should be developing your leadership skills. And I am all for that. Last thing is, I think, David, I just want to make sure that people know how to find you, where to find you. You've got, of course, on LinkedIn, follow David Albritton. His name we spelled properly in the notes and in the title, but David Albritton, he's got a PCC after his name in case there's more than one of them, but I think you'll find the right guy. Great. Newsletters come out of David as well. How often do you do them? Every week? Is it weekly? Every 2 weeks?
Nowadays, I'm every 2-3 weeks. It's,
okay.
It's how much time do I have to write these days?
It's somewhat inconsistently, but they come out. But David's newsletters are great. Go to CRA, his company, CRAINC.com. And is 1988 still active, David? Can we just go to
the better email address is david@admiredleadership.com.
David@admiredleadership.com. Perfect.
And
got
for
it
those, it relates to Alex. I mean, when you go to Lead with Alex, you can get a free 3-day sign up for it as a subscription. We don't spam people at all. But if anybody's interested in getting a full week's access, just email me and I can get the team to set that up for you as well.
Email David at leadership. Admired leadership.
Another thing, and I'd say these admired leadership field notes, they're free. You can sign up for that. Just search for admired leadership field notes. They come to you free every day. And what I've done, as I engage my coaching clients, people I mentor, and just people I engage with, they're so valuable. I forward them a lot to people on topic because they're so topical on things related to things that we're dealing with every day. And so it's a great practice as you want to foster great relationships. You're investing in people by sharing things like this. Okay. So think about it as a great best practice to when you see something cool that, might resonate with people in your network, share it.
Excellent, David. Thanks so much. So we've got CRINC.com. We've got David at admiredleadership.com. Admired Leadership Field Notes by Dr. Stutman. That's right? Is that correct? Yeah.
Correct.
Leadwithalex.com. Lots of stuff to go and check out David and learn more about what he's doing. And again, go back to our previous episode from 2 years ago. I think it's kind of evergreen. Great conversation. You learn more about David personally in that one. And I can't, there's a reason why I have people on more than once. It's because I value the relationship I have with you, David, but it's also because I think people need to hear what you're saying. And I'm glad that you're just, you're a voice for the profession. You're a voice for us within the leadership world. And I am just excited to see where you're going. So thank you again for coming on, and hopefully come back again.
I will. Absolutely.
Right on.
Take care.
Thanks for taking the time to listen in on today's conversation. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe through the podcast player of your choice, share with your friends and colleagues, and leave me a review. 5 stars would be preferred, but it's up to you. Do you have ideas for future guests or you want to be on the show? Let me know at dan@trendingcommunicator.com. Thanks again for listening to The Trending Communicator.